I spoke to David Mellor earlier this morning, former Culture Secretary, and I put to him that actually at the heart of this, for me, it's all about trust. The minute you lose trust, the BBC loses everything. Let's now talk to Rebecca Ryan, Campaign Director of Defund the BBC. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Your take on this, it's a really sorry state of affairs. It just gets worse. It's an incredibly murky story. We now have 4 young people that have come forward. You've even got the Prime Minister intervening, saying, if there are more of you, come forward. This is our national broadcaster.
Exactly, and I think that's the thing that myself and our supporters really are getting so deeply frustrated with is you know, 2/3 of the country, poll after poll, show want to get rid of the licence fee anyway. We're not happy to be forced to pay for the BBC. If people want to carry on paying for the BBC as a subscription service or whatever, then that's for them to choose to do. But people currently, if they watch any live TV, are forced to pay for this organisation. And this is an organisation that is now a national embarrassment. You know, they cannot get their house in order. They cannot deal with these issues in a timely and appropriate way. We've seen time after time these types of scandals and allegations with Jimmy Savile, with Rolf Harris, Westwood. So we've got all of these situations where it keeps happening to the BBC. And when things like this keep happening to the BBC, they should have their house in order to be able to deal with this in a quick way, in a transparent way that saves the country this embarrassment. So, you know, that's our view, is that, you know, we shouldn't have to pay for this if we don't want to pay for it.
So I think you make a really pertinent point. We now live in a multi-channel environment. The landscape has changed dramatically since the BBC was set up with those Reithian principles of inform, educate and entertain. And if they are making great programming, which is what I hear the whole time, then your point is valid. If people want to pay for it, they're paying for Netflix, they're paying for Amazon, they can pay for the BBC. Just in terms of the BBC's governance. Now, obviously, this was the launch of the annual accounts, the report, which is normally a very dull and boring affair. But the highlight of this is the salaries from these presenters. So Gary Lineker is paid £1.3 million, £1.35 million to do nothing but talk about football. Alan Shearer, £445,000. That is £2 million on 2 blokes talking about football. Zoe Ball, who is a DJ, earns nearly £1 million. Then on top of that, you've got news presenters there, but also you've got people I've never heard of earning a huge amount of money. And Mary Berry, who basically is a cook, is on over 200,000.
I know, it's absolutely appalling, and this is what people are so frustrated about. You've had Gary Lineker, you know, who we've only just got out over the sort of scandal around him and his lack of impartiality, you know, where the BBC essentially breached the contract with the British people under the terms of their charter, which allows them to tax people for watching any live broadcast TV. They have to be impartial. Now, but Gary Lineker's allowed to say whatever he likes. And yet again, he dragged the name of the BBC through the dirt and that whole furore that surrounded that incident. And here he is, still top earner, earning, you know, 1.35 million. It's crazy, and it really infuriates those people who don't want to fund this organisation, but, you know, are sports fans, for example, so they like watching Sky Sports or something like that, so they have to pay for the licence fee.
There are some really interesting anomalies in here as well. Fiona Bruce allegedly gets $395,000, but this is for Question Time. One programme, that's pretty good income, isn't it? $395,000 for Question Time. Now, the caveat is that if you work for an independent production company, and increasingly the BBC outsources these productions to indies, that payment isn't actually listed.
Exactly. So there isn't this full transparency, and that's one of the main issues with the BBC, is that it's a PR exercise to protect the licence fee, and, you know, that is the top priority, to keep ahead with business as usual with this constant supply of guaranteed funding. Now, what people want to see is transparency from a public sector broadcaster, and they want to see accountability, and they want to stop seeing this kind of chaotic mess where the BBC is supposedly looking into investigating its own issues and failing abysmally. So yeah, it's dire, and yeah, it can't carry on this way.
In terms of how this evolves, I don't expect you to get involved in that, but David Miller, and obviously he has great experience in all of this, he didn't even know who the Secretary of State for Culture was. The fact is the government really doesn't know what's going on. As we say, it is a publicly funded body. I do get the sense that things are turning in change of public appetite. You said 2/3 of people are against the licence fee. I didn't know if that's what you find. I didn't know. Is it really that high?
Yeah, poll after poll will show that it's around about sort of 66 to 70% of people want to see the end to the licence fee. It's a pretty consistent number, and that's been the case since our organisation was founded. So and I think, there will be a significant percentage of those people who would choose to still subscribe to the BBC. It's not to say that 2/3 of the country want to get rid of the BBC altogether. They just don't want to be forced to pay for the BBC if they're not watching the BBC. And a lot of people are turning off because they just can't deal with the sort of woke seep into every single storyline on the BBC. So people are just frustrated. And then when they see things going on as we've seen this week, they're just, why should we have to pay for this mess?
Rebecca, very good to talk to you. That's Rebecca Ryan, Campaign Director for Defund the BBC.